Beautiful outside, right? I like this weather, like high of 71. I'm built for that, not 110, right? This is so nice. I love it. We like actually opened all of our windows and got fresh air. We had a soccer game on Saturday and it wasn't too hot. I still got sunburned, but it wasn't too hot. And we won 2-0, which was very exciting. I was so nervous about our game. I was so glad that we won. Well, I hope you all had a nice weekend. It's starting to feel far away already, the weekend. Monday's always hard to come back from the weekend, right? But we're already in week 6, which is hard to believe. We're almost like a third of the way through the semester. We have our first exam coming up 1 week from today, which I'll talk about at the end, because that is something that I want to make sure you're feeling prepared for and know what to expect. And then obviously we'll jump back into where we were last time as well. And so don't let me forget to talk about that at the end. I probably won't forget, but in case I put it up there just to remind myself. But we'll get it back into where we left off. We didn't make it too far into male anatomy. We just kind of started with talking about external reproductive structures, right? So we talked about everything that is defined on this slide, but there are still a few more to get into. So I'm gonna write that up here still. We're still in the external structures. All right, so we talked about that the penis obviously being the main male sexual organ, made up a lot of cavernous bodies, spongy bodies, which engorge with blood when a man is aroused. Kind of the head of the penis or the glands being the most sensitive. A couple of other things, this is probably like the weirdest pictures ever, where they're trying to make them parts being available to see here so that you know what we're talking about. But the corona, the frenulum, the glands, the urethral opening, so a few other structures. So the corona is the rim or crown of the penis. So remember we had that question of like, if someone asks you to point to your corona, be careful. We might want to clarify what they're asking, right? Since this could refer to this, it also means like crown as well. And obviously it can be a drink, but what we're talking about here is the rim or the crown of the glands. The glands is the head of the penis. And I think I wrote this up here before, but it's also the most sensitive part of male anatomy, right? It's kind of similar to the clitoris in women, a lot of nerve endings in the head of the penis. It can be covered with foreskin or not. We'll talk a little bit more about circumcision later today. But depending on whether a young man or a boy is circumcised, they'll have foreskin or not covering the head of the penis. And again, more on that in a little bit. A couple of other things in the picture on the right here, the scrotum. So a big task for the scrotum. The scrotum contains the testes. And the testes play a huge role in something that we'll talk a lot about today, which is sperm production. So they produce sperm and hormones. Really interesting part of male anatomy, right? The scrotum, because it contains the testes, it has to stay at a very specific temperature in order for sperm production to occur. And we're going to talk a lot about sperm production in the coming slides. But men produce an incredible number of sperm each day, as we were talking about previously. And if this part of a man's body is too warm or too cold, that doesn't happen properly. So the scrotum actually will like retreat up closer to the body to get warmth when it's cold. And it might also like drop down lower away from the body to get cooler if a man is hot. So that a whole joke of like, it's cold outside and a man's penis appears smaller, there's some truth to that, right? It's not drastic. We're not talking about a huge drastic difference. But when it's cold outside or a man is cold, the testes will automatically, or the scrotum will automatically shrink up toward the body to maintain body heat and stay at that optimal temperature range. So it's kind of an interesting phenomenon that happens there, but it's very sensitive to temperature. And that's a kind of a little bit of where that joke comes from of like, oh, it was cold or it's cold outside or whatnot, because the body will pull in to maintain that warmth, if that makes sense. So those are kind of all the external ones. We had a few that we had left off last time. And just like female reproductive anatomy, an incredible amount of variety from man to man, right? So again, dangerous Google search, right, to do. But some men, right, being larger than others, hair versus less hair or more hair. I kind of feel like this is aggressive. It's like pointing at me in an aggressive way. Like I feel like I need to move over here. And that just might just be me, right? But again, a lot of variety from circumcised to uncircumcised, which we'll talk a little bit more about later. But just like women, right? No two men have the exact same penis size, shape, width, and so on. Yeah, let's move on from that picture. All right. So the testes, which we left off on here, right, are a very important part of male anatomy for hormones and also the production of sperm. So we'll talk a lot about sperm production in the coming slides here. But as we mentioned, right, can be a very like temperature sensitive part of the body. So let me erase this so I can write some stuff up here. These boards erased so nicely in the beginning, and now I feel like I have to like muscle it. I have a sore arm from erasing. Yeah, or softball, one of the others. All right, so sperm production we can call spermatogenesis. And write that up here. Spermatogenesis is the production of sperm. And this is a constant, ongoing cycle that men are taking like part in, right? It's always happening. And do you remember about how many sperm a man produced each day? Anyone remember what we said it was? I'll tell you, but anyone remember? It was millions. Yeah. 300 million, right? So you were getting there, 300 million per day. Right, so men like a lot of quantity over quality. Women, it's quantity or quality over quantity. The other way around. Women produce 1 egg per month, or like kind of finalize 1 egg per month. Men 300 million sperm a day. Right, it's quite a few. That's a lot of sperm. This whole process takes a very long time, from beginning to end. It takes 64 to 72 days from beginning to end. So from when a sperm starts to be developed to when it's mature and ready to be released by the body, 64 to 72 days. So it's this constant ongoing cycle of sperm being stored, produced, released, stored, produced, released, ongoing over and over and over again. Did you have a?
Yeah, I was gonna say 300 million sounds like a lot. So like how, like if you could like quantify it, like
Size wise?
Yeah. Like,
Yeah.
Is it like a quarter? Is it like
Sure. So about the size of like a teaspoon, right? Like, so think about like the typical male ejaculate is about the volume is about the size of a teaspoon, right? And so not a very large amount size wise. Sperm are really, really, really tiny, right? Super, super microscopically tiny. So in like a teaspoon size, you would have 300 to 500 million sperm. Yeah, lots of sperm, right? Plenty to go around, I suppose. And only one gets to fertilize the egg, right? So it's a huge competition for those sperm. Other questions so far before we? Okay, so lots of structures involved. So for women, we talk about menstruation, right? And all the hormonal processes and structures involved in that. For men, it's sperm production. So the seminiferous tubules and the epididymis are two structures that play a big role. The seminiferous tubules are these really thin coiled structures in the testes, and that's where sperm is produced. So you can think about these as like these long, thin coiled like structures. Again, 300 million sperm a day. If you were to unravel this tubing in a man's body, it would be 700 feet of coiled tubing. Right, that's how much these coils are inside a man's body. They are tightly wound, very, very little, 700 feet if you were to stretch them out, right? Not that that would ever happen, but if you're wondering how much of them there is, And that's because we're producing so much, right? This is just a really like large ongoing process. And those sperm that are being produced are stored in an area called the epididymis. It's this little structure on the back side of each testicle that stores sperm, and it's where they continue to mature, right? So they start to be developed in the seminiferous tubules. They're produced there. And then these immature sperm are stored at the back of the epididymis. And that takes like that 64-ish days for them to mature and finish growing and be ready to be released. Now, once there's some kind of stimulation or they're needed or about to be released for some reason, they go through what's called the vas deferens. It's a sperm carrying tube that begins at the testes and ends at the urethra. So when they go to be released, they go through this long tube called the vas deferens. And there's a lot of glands that they go through on the way out of the body, right? So sperm by themselves is not typically what leaves a man's body. It's seminal fluid, which contains a lot of other things that come from different glands and vesicles in a man's body. So these seminal vesicles are these little glands that add the fluid to sperm, right? They give it like an alkaline fluid that makes up that seminal fluid that you see when a man ejaculates. Kind of that milky white color comes from some of these glands and vesicles that the sperm passes through. So to keep going on that, seminal vesicles give us about 70% of that seminal fluid, right? And they transport that sperm in preparation to leave a man's body through ejaculation. It also goes through the prostate gland, right? So the seminal vesicles, the prostate, and the Cowper's gland. The prostate gland gives it that milky white color, right? And that fluid that the sperm is in has a lot of functions to it. For one, it contains a lot of trace elements of like sugars to give sperm energy to make that long swim up through the uterus, up through the fallopian tubes to find an egg. So there's a lot of like sugar substances in there, which can be very directly impacted by what a man puts into his body and consumes. It also tends to neutralize the acidity of the vagina and the vaginal tract to help the sperm survive. So when a man ejaculates, if he does that inside of like a woman's vaginal canal, millions of sperm die right off the bat, right? It's so sad, right? It's a tragic tale, right, of dead sperm, right? But they are, the minute they enter the vaginal tract, the acidity of the vaginal tract kills off millions of sperm. And this milky white fluid that comes from the prostate gland helps them to kind of give them a protective coating to survive, swim up through the vaginal tract into the fallopian tubes. They also go through the Cowper's gland, which kind of causes a lot of pre-ejaculate to come out to clear the way for sperm. It flushes out any foreign or like urine or any like little particles that might be in the urethral opening. Does pre-ejaculate sometimes contain sperm? Yes, right? So that whole idea of like pulling out before you ejaculate, not a sound method of birth control because pre-ejaculate can contain seminal fluid as well. Not as much of it, but it's definitely possible to get pregnant with pulling out before a man ejaculates because it still contains some of that seminal fluid within the pre-ejaculate. So as the sperm matures, it goes through the seminal vesicles, through the prostate gland, through the Cowper's gland, and eventually then is pushed out of the body through ejaculation. A typical male ejaculate, right? So if a man expels like seminal fluid from their body, as I mentioned, about a teaspoon, 200 to 500 million sperm within that male ejaculate. And it's wild to think that if we're talking about male-female intercourse, if a man ejaculates 200 to 500 million sperm, and only one gets to fertilize the egg. Those aren't great odds, right, for those sperm, which is why there are so many, because it's such a challenging journey to make. It takes like 5 days for these sperm to swim up through the vaginal canal, up through the uterus, up through the fallopian tubes to find that egg, which is why there's so many sugars, proteins, carbs, and acids in that seminal fluid. Somebody asked me once how many calories are in the typical male ejaculate. I did not know, but I now know 5 to 7, very carb friendly, very low carb, right? If you were curious. But there are interesting things about male ejaculate when we talk about this. As I said, what a man puts into his body can very much affect the taste of their seminal fluid, right? So if we're performing like oral sex on a man, right, and you have ejaculate, you can oftentimes like affect the taste of that ejaculate through the things that you put in your system. So if a man eats a lot of like very like sweet foods, like juices or fruits, their seminal fluid might be very sweet. If they eat a lot of like very bitter things or a lot of like drugs or like substances, it might be very bitter or alkaline. Same is true for female ejaculate as well. What men and women put into their systems can often affect the taste of that seminal fluid as it comes out of their body. You can also, I learned a lot of random facts about sperm. I had a class like 2 years ago that had so many random questions and I learned a lot from it. I actually kind of loved it. You can be allergic to a man's ejaculate. Oftentimes it's because something they put in their system is something that you were allergic to. So let's say you're very allergic to shellfish and a man eats a lot of shellfish, like 12 to 24 hours before like you have exposure to their seminal fluid in some way. You could have an allergic reaction to it, right? It's definitely possible. Yeah.
So my grandma and my aunts are allergic to like citrus fruit. So
Okay.
if this guy had a lot of citrus fruit, do you think they could have an allergic reaction?
It's possible. Not that you want to think about this with your grandma
No.
or your aunt, but yeah, I mean, so if they were performing oral sex on a man, like, okay, sorry for any visual that might come up from this. If they were performing oral sex on a man who had consumed, it would have to be a lot
Yeah,
of citrus
that's fair.
because it's going to be in such a small amount. But if they consumed enough of it, it could be enough to like, in theory, irritate their mouth or their throat, like cause it to be itchy. It's totally possible.
My grandma would appreciate
Yeah, you can go home and tell her, Grandma, guess what I learned today? Next time you are doing whatever, right? Yeah,
it. God, I-
it's possible. So it would require that that man consume quite a bit. Like they went on like a citrus bender. I don't know, right? Like they'd have to do a lot, but it's definitely possible. Yeah.
So you're only experiencing those symptoms like in the throat, like you wouldn't experience it like.
Depends on your allergy. I think.
Yeah, it would depend on the severity of the allergy, but it should be like a relatively mild reaction. It also could be that it has nothing to do with what they consumed. It is possible to be allergic to a man's ejaculate, period, without like a food or, so you would have a typical like allergic reaction. In that case, it could be systemic, right? So it could be that, like if we're talking intercourse, it could lead to serious irritation of the vaginal canal. Like a vaginal infection or a yeast infection would be pretty like likely or common.
I just wonder if that like happens to a lot of women without them like realizing it.
It's not very common. It's possible, but it's not super common. So just as, I mean, yeah. Mm-hmm. And it's hard to know, right? And oftentimes it goes missed, right? Like it could be very easy to miss if it's mild. The dietary stuff is probably the biggest prevalent piece, but it could just be that you are allergic. It's really uncommon, but in theory, it could be an excuse, right? I might be allergic, right? I once had somebody ask if seminal fluid and sperm have teeth whitening properties. No, they do not. If someone says that to you, that is completely false. But it is possible to be allergic to them. Was there a hand over? Did you have, oh, I thought you had a question. Other like thoughts, questions, anything here? I told you 5 to 7 calories, right? Say that again. I missed like.
Is that like as mythical as like people telling you to put period blood on your face for better moisturization?
Yeah, like no, there's no evidence for that, just like there's no evidence for teeth whitening properties, right? The second you said that, I just watched Saltburn this week. And that was all I could think about it.
I'm sorry.
I'm like, thank you. Now, if any of you have seen that, now I have him like dancing naked.
Did it with the dog factor, the plot
Okay, I've
actually
never
sucked.
watched it.
They could have done it so much better.
Yeah, if you Saltburn, I don't know, I'm not recommending it, but I watched it. I was forced to watch it, and it was interesting, I guess. I don't know. Cool twist. Okay, so I have a little review activity for this because this is a complicated process and we just spent some time talking about it. So I want you to get into groups of like, let's say like 4 people, 4-ish. I don't want it to be too big because I want you to all be able to huddle around, the paper. But, get into groups of like 3 or 4 and then come up here and grab one of these sheets. So I have on here, the life of a sperm cell. And it's out of order. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna put it in the correct order. You just need to write the letters. If you think you have it, raise your hand and let me know. I brought candy for the first 2 groups that get it correct. I hope you all get it correct, but it's a race. So, once you have your group, send someone up. You're not turning it in, it's just for review, okay? So like 3, 4 people, come grab a sheet. And then when you think you have it, raise your hand, I'll come check it.
I just water you got in there?
Yeah, just water. I already drink the coffee.
My shoes are tight. I don't want you to try. Got it, I got it.
I'm in the middle.
Solitary.
It's okay, it's refreshing. I think.
You're just gonna pull it out.
And then it's rich.
Pretty big. Wow.
Huh? No, I have it already.
Oh, okay. Okay, sorry.
I don't process.
Oh, we're putting it in order. Oh.
Yeah, so just the letters in order at the bottom.
It's not, that's not.
Yeah, that's it. Could you go back to the slide for like? Maybe, yeah, maybe that.
Maybe that.
Just for a little.
Sure.
Yeah, it's like the last one. I feel basically. So not that this one.
So just write the letters at the bottom.
Oh, yeah. So, okay, so C is first. C, no, C is. And then.
Oh, wait, no. Oh, wait, so, maybe. Yes, see, it's just like the homework. It's just like a simple, like 1 to 2 page.
Yeah, it's like a 2-page paper plus whatever activity.
And then like.
We'll talk about it. For
That's fine.
Okay, so like, what is like, very, it's not like very, like, it's very broad.
Yeah, I want you to be able to. You know,
I was thinking about doing like Game of Thrones or something.
Is it?
Because I think, like, I don't know what the actual, I didn't read that, but I don't know what the actual topic is, like.
We'll talk about it, so Monday's exam, but probably Wednesday, we'll talk about it, because it's due coming up.
On the 30th.
Yeah, so I'll talk about it on, probably on Wednesday, either this Wednesday or next. But yeah, you can pick whatever one you want to do.
I don't know whether we should. I'm not gonna write it.
That's like.
I think I read it.
Well, you want it. From the way I feel like. My job in the 20 minutes before.
We have one group that got it, keep going, keep going.
Or no, you know what? You don't got it.
Well, when it's last, I think we use it, so you get all the. And then you, like. Yeah, you gotta get into the.
Right.
What would I do?
Correct, correct. And then you're off.
This one's the last part. Oh, this is the H. Yeah, H was next. Oh, that's it. On A. A.
I can't promise it's right.
These are all your fault. We have it. Oh, I don't. I'm really not here. We have. No, I can. Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, I know. So far.
All right, let's see if we can get one more group. One more group. Okay, here, if you each want to grab.
Yeah. How many? I have another one. Do you guys want from me?
One more group.
He doesn't know.
I'm okay.
Whoa. Wait, one for me. You gotta get it right first.
All right, for one more group.
And then. Okay. I feel like as I pass, I can. Okay.
I think you know, right, yeah.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I do. Okay, so I'm. I would be.
And then all the other turns. Here's the first one.
I would be kind of.
Yeah, right.
So let's go ahead and,
Go ahead. Yeah.
Cured cancer, a civil rights lawyer.
So, yeah, well, some of you got that really quickly. A lot of you got the first two correct, like right off the bat. So, here, let me put this up. Aren't those like the cutest looking little sperm ever? Right? They look so happy. Okay. So here is the correct. And you're not turning that in, but I do think it's a really good way to kind of quickly review. So here, let's read this together. And again, this was written as if you were the sperm. I like that, right? First person view of the process. So as a sperm, right, I am produced in the seminiferous tubules of the testicles. I mature in the epididymis. When there's adequate stimulation and the penis becomes erect, I leave the epididymis and travel up into the body through the vas deferens toward the bladder and ejaculatory ducts. As I pass through the seminal vesicles, prostate gland, and the Cowper's glands, fluids are added so I can live longer and swim more easily. I'm now officially the substance we call semen. the urethra carries me along with about 200 to 500 million other sperm out of the penis in a process called ejaculation. I go through the cervix and into the uterus and into the fallopian tubes in search of an egg cell. If I can find the ovum before the other sperm do, I will be the winner, part of a fertilized egg. Right. So again, just kind of a little bit of a review just for fun and for candy. And if I go back here, forgot to I probably should have mentioned this one before I gave that to you, but that's okay. I was excited about the candy, so I forgot. But when enough stimulation occurs, right, a man will get an erection, right? And what happens here is those different cavernous and spongy bodies within the penis engorge with blood, right, causing the penis to become firm or erect. And you can see a picture of someone who's not erect versus is erect. And this is coordinated by the autonomic nervous system. A lot of this is a very autonomic nervous system, sometimes even involuntary level response. When men are young, they will often get erections when they don't necessarily want to, right? And it can take some time for men to learn to control that tendency. Sometimes men will even wake up with an erection as a result of a dream, or maybe even just something that was happening in their nervous system during sleep. So it's somewhat a nervous system response, but it also is often the result of arousal or being turned on. All of those arteries in the penis expand, and that is what causes the penis to become erect. Now, then from there, if a man is going to ejaculate, that's where the semen comes out of the body, right? The semen is expelled through the urethral tube of the penis. It builds up, right, in the different bulbs, right, that we just talked about. And then there's powerful muscles that propel it out of the body when they reach a level of stimulation where they're going to orgasm, right? So ejaculation is made up of a couple of different phases here, but all of this coordinated by the nervous system, those blood vessels becoming aroused, and sometimes even a little bit without conscious awareness, especially when men are going through puberty. We've even seen cases of erections in the womb, right? Doing an ultrasound, a little boy will have an erection as the body is growing and everything is kind of coming together. So somewhat automatic, somewhat controlled by arousal as well. And then back to the cute little things. Any thoughts, questions, anything so far before we keep going? Any more sperm related questions for today? Okay. So just like with women, there are concerns, right, for men when it comes to functioning, size, appearance, and things along those lines. Sorry for the picture, that can be somewhat traumatic to see. But penis size is something that a lot of men do have to struggle with, right? Oftentimes men, as it says up here, will see their penis size and appearance as a big part of their masculinity, or even their worth as a person or as a partner, as a lover. So you saw some of that pressure when we talked about women and breasts. For men, it's often very much related to penis size and all of those kind of elements and appearance. Lot of stereotypes about penis size, right? If you have big hands or big feet or the length between this finger and this finger, all of those things are kind of correlational, right? None of them necessarily mean anything. You could have someone who's a very large individual with a very small penis, and it can go the other way as well, right? So a lot of that is very correlational in nature. It always reminds me, there was a little blue collar comedy clip about this. I'll play it for you. It's really brief, but I'll play it for you anyway. I think it's a good example here. Let me bring it up. Where'd it go? There it is. Hold on, I gotta pause this. Everyone, let me post it. Okay, from an old blue collar comedy to where, right? Again, a lot of those are very correlational in nature. It doesn't necessarily mean anything, but people love to guess and talk about that anyway. And if you remember, we talked about this at the beginning, 5.6 inches to 6 inches is the average male penis size. Very few men actually have a penis much larger than 7 inches. It's 12% is over 7 inches. Right. So for all the stereotypes and ideas around this, Like the average, when erect, is like 5.5 to 5.6 to 6 inches, with only about 12% of men being like significantly larger than that. And oftentimes we get those norms and ideas from porn, right? From pornography, which is often incredibly skewed, and the people who are performing in them are not like the typical individual that you would see. One other really big concern and like area of male reproductive functioning is circumcision, right? And I mentioned this earlier. And if you remember back, Egypt was the one that was credited with kind of starting the idea of circumcising some like young men. And in Egypt, though, in the 6th dynasty, it was practiced as a teenage boy as part of a public ceremony as a rite of passage into manhood. We don't tend to do that in our culture. Like most boys who are circumcised is within the first 48 hours of life. So you're born, and within that first day or two, when you're in the hospital, kind of getting checked and recovering, and the mother is recovering, that's typically when they perform a circumcision. It's a very short procedure. And there's like a local anesthetic given. And what they do is what you've seen here, they take the foreskin and they cut it back and then sew it, right? And that little boy like recovers and is usually none the wiser, right? It's not something that they do later in life. It's done very, very early, again, with like a local anesthetic. So there are some interesting like pros and cons here though. And this is something that is kind of becoming more and more of a discussion as we talk about like my body, my choice ideas. In our country, it is the norm to circumcise a young man, right? 55 to 65% of newborn boys are circumcised in our country. Now, that's not the norm everywhere, right? It is definitely more so here than in other places. There are some advantages and disadvantages of circumcising someone. So people who are for circumcision often talk about the health benefits. So when you circumcise someone, you remove like this area. So like in an uncircumcised penis, there's this whole area here where it's very common that bacteria will build up, right? And it can lead to infections. It makes the penis harder to clean. Versus if you remove the foreskin, the head of the penis is exposed. It's easier to clean, less infections tend to occur. So there's a lot of like benefits in terms of reducing the likelihood of like bacteria and viruses and infections occurring. It's often something that has religious beliefs associated with it, right? Some cultures believe in doing this or versus not doing this. And there's a lot of proponents who argue normality, right? And again, it is the norm to circumcise people in our country, though not always, it's not always done. People who are against it say that it's unnecessarily traumatic, that that young man was robbed of their choice. Now, you could, in theory, do this later. So let's say you weren't circumcised. You could go in and be circumcised as an adult. It's a very quick, like, procedure. They, again, would give you a local anesthetic. It just you take a little longer to heal because obviously the penis is larger than it would be as a baby. You could, in theory, reverse a circumcision, but it's typically not all that successful, right? There have been people who take that thin stretch of skin, that perineum, like stretch of skin, and you can actually rebuild that foreskin in a way and like uncircumcise yourself, but it tends to lead to issues. It's not practiced very commonly. It's much easier to circumcise than undo a circumcision. So there's kind of this growing norm of not circumcising young men so that they can have that choice when they get older. That's something that's starting to grow in popularity. And it might alter sexual functioning. Some people say that it reduces sensitivity, though if you were always circumcised, you wouldn't necessarily have a basis for comparison. So there are some pros and cons. And it's something that you typically do, again, right after birth. So it's a conversation that a lot of like people will have when they're pregnant. Are we going to do this or not? Our firstborn, we didn't know if it was a boy or a girl all the way up until like we gave birth to her. Well, I say we, I didn't give birth to her. My partner gave birth to her. She'd probably be like, you didn't do it. If I said we, and then I felt bad afterward. So my daughter, every time we would do an ultrasound, she would curl into a ball. And every time she curled into a ball and like turned away from the machine, like they couldn't tell what her sex was. And so they're like, we're like 80% sure it's a little girl. And so we never talked about circumcision. And then we ended up doing a C-section. And they pulled her out, and I swear it was like the longest pause of my life. They're all, congratulations, it's a tick, 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 at like 3 seconds. I swear it was probably like that. And they said girl. But in that time, I was like, oh my gosh, are we gonna circumcise if it's a boy? We didn't talk about it. And it was a girl. I have all girls. But it's interesting, like this is something that you typically choose very quickly, and done within the first 48 hours. Hmm? Questions, comments, thoughts about circumcision? Yeah.
Country.
Oh,
I have to find a story if you want, I can share with you.
you say that, so I'm having a hard time hearing you, just because of the thing. Say that one more time.
I have to find a story about this, this surgery.
Okay,
Yeah, if you want, I can share.
okay, go ahead. Well, now that you put it out there, you have to, right? Like, we're all hearing.
In my country, it's like 95% boys have done this surgery. And when I was in primary school, I'm from Bangladesh. It's a crazy country. I love my country. But in school, primary school, this time I was in class 3, and all of my friends, they're turned down their pants and saying that, yeah, I have done this, I have done this. And then I came to my house and said, what's wrong with it? Why? I'm not, I don't have this. And then my parents, like every only like 2 religion in Bangladesh, they don't do this, and that's all the religion people, they are doing this surgery. In local language, they say the Muslim,
Okay.
and you know what? After this surgery, they do a party. It's a very big party.
Yeah.
It's like really so funny. After my surgery, there is around 1,000 of people I invited to my house. And my cousin brother, when he was born, like newborn, this time he also had this surgery, but it's take like 3 to 4 days, as to 1 week. He is totally fine.
Okay.
But in Bangladesh, it's take around 1 month, and you were just in your bed, and everyone doing party in front of you. It's like 3 days.
Okay.
They cut down 3 to 4 cows, goat, and that's crazy.
I love that you shared that because it's such a different like cultural experience than
You know what, the mic, the loudspeaker, if someone's doing this surgery in semi-valley, more part people can know that he is doing the surgery in the party.
I love
And others, all the relatives, my others, all the relatives, all of my neighbors, everyone come this party. Yeah,
Wow.
like all of the boys are like used to with this.
That's funny. And oh, boys comparing penis size in third grade, right? That doesn't right. But I love that. I went to a whisk once, right? Like it was a huge party. Little boy, like it was like I want to say he was like 10 days old at that point. And our friends are Jewish, and we went to their house, and they had like hundreds of people there to watch this little boy get circumcised. And we showed up after that. Like, we showed up for the party afterward, right? But yeah, I mean, it is something that sometimes people celebrate. There are a lot of religious and beliefs around this. I love that you shared that. Thank you, right? Thank you. Yeah, right. It's performed by somebody in front of everyone. It's like a rite of passage, right? And so we had our daughter at that point, and we were like, I don't know, if we wanna, like show her that. Like she was little, but so we showed up afterwards to celebrate. They had like a huge penis cake. It was hilarious. Right? So I mean, memorable. When do you get to eat a penis cake? So like I had to. So but I mean, there are like all sorts of interesting customs around this, like from culture to culture.
Conversation before, they are more crazy about doing this party. They are free, you know, like no work, like 2% women go for work, and all the men do everything. They and men are also free, like 10% to 20% people do job and others all are doing business.
Mhm.
And like when my parents do give marriage, the marriage ceremony,
Mhm.
this time when they get married, this time in this party like 5,000 people, and they are doing this party for like 7 days.
That's wild.
Yeah, so they don't think about their work and nothing. They
What are you doing for the next 7 days? Oh, I'm celebrating the circumcision. I'm busy. Right? I'm busy. Yeah, interesting. All right. Couple other things with male health concerns, and then I mean, I have that other half of the video for you. I know you're super excited about it. So urology is the specialty area for male genital health concerns. So typically with men, they just go to their primary doctor, their primary physician, to be in charge of like urology and any kind of like reproductive health. But specifically, urology would be the medical specialty for men, and also for women who are having any kind of like urinary tract issues. We could go to urologist as well. A couple of like common cancer are things that men are often monitoring for. Enlarged or inflamed prostates can happen sometimes as part of an infection. There's a condition called priapism, where erections can sometimes be painful and long lasting, not related to excitement or desire. Remember, we said that some of that process is somewhat of a nervous system response. So there are some cases where men are getting like persistent erections against their like desire for one, and it might require treatment. Sometimes it's a surgical procedure to fix this, but it's something that can sometimes happen. So like enlarged prostates, priapism, those are two kind of common ones, along with prostate cancer, which is the most frequently diagnosed cancer among men. Yeah.
I was gonna say about priapism though, so that's in the military though, I was at a Department of Marines. And they always check for priapism, that would be maybe like a back injury.
Mhm.
And then we can move or not.
Yeah.
So it's like a big deal, it's like checked out, so you don't get paralyzed.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, there's a lot of like correlations there, right? And so sometimes it's related to injury, it can be related to like a wide variety of things, but yeah, it's not an uncommon condition. Sometimes it's just like occasionally, but it would require treatment if it was persistent, you know, if somebody was getting that all the time. So again, importance for men of going to see a doctor from a very young age, like for both men and women, or for any baby, when you go to the doctor, they're going to check your reproductive anatomy. And they continue to do that all the way through, right? So even as an adult, as a teenager, this is often something that they're screening for, right? For prostate cancer and checking these different things as you get older. Right, so important for men to be following through with their reproductive health, just like it is for women. And then, as I mentioned, I have the second half of that video. I can go back here. So I played you the one with women, and the one with women was related to their breasts. This one is a bunch of men who take off their pants to talk about their penis size and like experiences. Some of them don't, some of them are just like in their underwear or boxers, but others kind of go beyond that. So I want to play this for you. I'm only going to play you about 12 minutes of it. But I think that it is a really like there's a lot of variation in maturity level in this clip, right? Some people are more comfortable than others, but I still think it's a good vulnerable portrayal. And I know you missed the music. So
Is this two different films? Or the
Yes,
same, like?
same people made it, yeah.